When it comes to Jesse Belvin, many say he could have been bigger than Frank Sinatra, Sam Cooke, and Nat King Cole at that time. And that's a big statement. He was your favorite artist. Look, legendary soul singer Etta James said this. She said he could have been bigger than Sam Cooke and Nat King Cole because Jesse had charisma as well as the looks, style, and sound. And when he peered into your eyes, you melted. And this was back when every guy, black or white, wanted to be as cool as actor James Dean. But she said Jesse Belvin was beyond cool. And she considers him the greatest singer of her generation, from rhythm and blues, rock and roll, crooner, you name it. Wow. Stevie Wonder in the interview said Jesse Belvin was his favorite artist, and he would almost die to meet him and really love the music he gave to the world because there was so much sincerity in his voice. Now, Marvin Gaye said when he saw Sam Cooke and Jesse Belvin, he tried to avoid his friends and family for days because he didn't want to talk or be talked to, because he was busy practicing and memorizing everything he heard Sam and Jesse do. Barbara Cooke, the former wife of Sam Cooke, who y'all all know ended up marrying Bobby Womack. Look, one time she was showing some of Sam Cooke's albums, right, after he died, that he had in the bag, and the only other artist in that bag was Jesse Belvin. Even Sam Cooke tried to model his career after Jesse Belvin. Lou Rawls said Jesse Belvin's album was the greatest jazz pop LP ever made. This guy, Jesse Belvin, was one of the most gifted pianists, prolific songwriters, and singers of his generation. You know, some call him the golden voice. Some call him the doo-wop king. They even gave him the nickname Mr. Easy because of how easy it was for him to write songs. His mother said one time she sent him to the store to get some milk, and when he returned a few minutes later, he had wrote 4 songs on the bag that the milk was in. Wow. He wrote the classic song, Earth Angel, when he was in the army. And in 1954, the legendary doo-wop group called the Penguins, they recorded it. And look, they say there was an 11-year-old boy now playing the piano for that session. And guess who it was? The maestro himself, Barry White. But I'm sorry to say that it's not true though, because as I digged a little deeper while working on the Barry White story, in a 1995 interview with Larry Katz of Boston Herald, Barry White denied writing or arranging the song and believed the story was exaggeration by journalists, although Barry and Jesse did live in the same neighborhood in Los Angeles. You know, Jesse was like 12 years older than Barry though. But anyway, look, the song Earth Angel, the history behind that song changed the game. That song became one of the first R&B singles to cross over onto the pop charts, selling over 1 million copies. Look, they say Earth Angel, they say that song was the first song to bring white and black people together during that time, especially the teenagers. Jesse Belvin would write songs so fast and only sell them for like $100 though, because at the time, see, during the 50s, the 1950s, he didn't know the music business, in which none of the black artists did, and he was just trying to get some money to help his family. But see, what's crazy is he would write songs for a bunch of his friends that was in groups in his neighborhood, all through LA, and then Jesse would go to Hollywood and to get them record deals. which ended up getting him caught up in a lot of contracts he didn't abide by. Like I said, he would sell songs and join another group, but on a contract, he would go by another name because he needed the money. He just loved doing music. But later on, a lot of them songs he ended up not getting credit for, like Earth Angel. He went to court and he did get his royalties at the end. Earth Angel, the truth behind that, his friends stole a song from his house when he was drafted to the military. Because when he wrote the song, it wasn't called Earth Angel. It was called Dream Girl. When Jesse was away, his mother still would let his friends in the house play the piano because basically that was the only piano in the neighborhood at the time. And Jesse's songbook was on the piano. That's how Jesse came home. Jesse Belvin came home from the military early because he was in a court battle with Doomtone Records and the Penguins over that song Earth Angel. Once he heard it on the radio, they say that beef though over that song got so deep. It was deep in the streets that was the rumor. The rumor was it was a war in the streets over that song. That's crazy, man. Another fact about Jesse is he was nominated for a Grammy at the first Grammy Awards show. The song he had, Guess Who, made the top 40, hitting number 36 on the pop charts, and it managed to reach number 7 on the R&B charts. And that song, the song was really a love letter written by his wife, Joanne, to him. He was in the military at the time during the Korean War. And the song really actually earned him 2 Grammy Award nominations in 1959. One for Best Male Vocal Performance, in which he lost to Frank Sinatra. And the other Grammy was Best Rhythm and Blues Performance, in which he lost to Dinah Washington. Now see, let's get to Jesse's wife, right? Joanne. Now Joanne played a big role in his career, becoming his songwriting partner and his manager later on. She was the only one Jesse could trust and had his back because, like I said earlier, he was caught up in a lot of contracts with small record labels. Like in a 3 or 4 year period, they say he has sung on 20 different record labels. And Joanne, she looked over and studied all his contracts and learned how to negotiate. That's crazy, man. A black woman back in the 50s being a manager. I bet the industry was scared of that. So look, when it came time for him to sign with RCA Victor Records, Joanne, his wife, was the one that made sure his deal was like Elvis Presley's deal, where he had movie deals and everything. Plus, part of Jesse's duties, right, when they signed him to RCA Records, was that he would be the vocal coach for Elvis Presley. And they paid him to help and teach Elvis Presley. Wow. Now, back to Joanne, right? Joanne Belvin made sure her husband Jesse wasn't going to get screwed out of no money. They actually were the blueprint to show black artists about the business side of the game at the time. But you know what's crazy? Jesse Belvin is not even in the Hall of Fame. He was never inducted. They got so many people in the Hall of Fame that really shouldn't even be in there. But they did say a lady named Jeanette Baker. Now Jeanette Baker, she's a well-known actress and singer whose great aunt was Josephine Baker, and she was good friends with Jesse Belvin. And she did do a petition to have him placed on the 2013 ballot for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, another thing is, and it's kind of spooky, right? You know that 27 Club where all them artists die at the age of 27 years old? Well, Jesse Belvin was the first one to start it off. He's the first member. That's crazy. But look, what I want to talk to y'all today about is his death on February 6, 1960, when him and his wife was killed in a car crash. A horrific head-on collision just hours after doing a concert. But many think they were murdered. So let's get into the story, y'all. Here we go, right? Now, the story goes, now see, during that time, especially in the Deep South, racism was crazy out there. Everything was segregated. But see, Jesse had just signed a major deal with the label RCA Victor Records, and he was promoting the album titled Mr. Easy, which was the follow-up to his last album titled Jesse Belvin, right? And the label, now RCA wanted more sales, and they knew in order to reach a bigger audience, he would need to tap into the segregated South. And they was trying to market him as the black Elvis Presley. Wow. Because see, look, like I said, Elvis was on that label too. They had signed him a few years back, and he was big at the time. And they was calling Elvis the white soul singer, or they was calling him a white Little Richard. That's crazy. But we all know, we know Elvis. We know Elvis, I'm going to say, admired black music. Blues, gospel, R&B. Little Richard said, if he was white, there would be no Elvis. I'm going to say that. I'm going to save both of their stories for later. But look, the label, right, they was grooming Jesse to cross over to the white audience. They was in competition with Capitol Records, who had Nat King Cole. And he was the king at the time. And they wanted Jesse to become a smooth ballad singer and be on the same level as Nat King Cole with a white fan base. But see, while he was trying to make his record label happy, Jesse felt he was losing his black fan base. And that's why he joined the R&B Caravan Tour, which had an all-black roster. And it was also the first rock and roll show of 1960. So look, right, they put Jesse on tour, and he had a show lined up at the 2,600 seat Robinson Auditorium in Little Rock, Arkansas, with Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, and a few other artists. And this show was supposed to be the first integrated show bringing white and black teenagers together for the first time. This wasn't a Chitlin Circuit tour now. This was the first mixed audience show ever in the state of Arkansas. And you know, Arkansas at that time was filled with racism because, you know, just a few years before that, the Little Rock 9 situation had happened. If y'all don't know about that, that's when it was a group of 9 black students enrolled in Little Rock Central High School and was physically and verbally abused and assaulted by white students. And the National Guards had to come down to make sure they got in school and were protected. I mean, they called the National Guards in, but they was racist too. Now, one of the black students even got acid thrown in their eyes. Wow. Shame, man. I'll save that for History Underrated. But anyway, look, back to the story now. Jesse Belvin was coming from California, and living there, he experienced racism, but when he came to the Deep South for the first time, it was a whole different ball game. When he saw what he saw in the South scared him so bad, he had to call his mama. He called his mama a few times and told her about the hatred he and the other R&B stars were experiencing, which made her scared for his safety. That made his mom scared for his safety because she usually heard from him every couple of weeks, but when she received 3 nervous phone calls from him during this tour, she became worried. And to be honest, at the time, Jesse Belvin's popularity was just as big as Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson's. And look, that week, he had already received death threats prior. So when they did this show, right, there were white supremacists in the crowd shouting and yelling racial slurs at Jesse and Jackie Wilson and everybody, and the rest of the black artists. The white supremacists were urging the white teenagers at the show to leave the show because when they didn't like the fact that whites and blacks mingling together all in one room. They lost it when they seen that. They started throwing glass bottles from the mezzanine and started fighting with blacks in the audience and everything. They say it got so bad, the show had to be stopped twice, and Jackie Wilson refused to perform, and him and the promoter and the police at the venue had got into it. Now, after the show, things got so bad to the point that Jesse Belvin, Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, and the rest of the black artists had to be escorted out of town. Better yet, they was ran out of town. Because see, the promoter of the show, he wanted them to perform a second show, but they refused. And that's when they was ordered to leave town at gunpoint. Wow. It got ugly, man. It got real ugly. And they say earlier, they had been 6 death threats on Jesse Belvin's life from angry whites. And Jesse and the rest of the singers, they had another show to do in Dallas, Texas. That was the next stop. And they was already getting death threats for that also. So look, right now in order to leave the town by all the angry white people, when they was walking to their car, they saw about 5 young white men near Jesse and Jackie Wilson's vehicles. Now, one witness stated that 2 men were trying to block the view of Jesse Belvin's car, while another was underneath it. But Jesse and them managed to escape. Now leaving Arkansas, they're in the car, right? Which was a Cadillac, black Cadillac Jesse had. It was Jesse, his wife Joanne, his friend and guitarist Kirk Davis, and his driver, whose name was Charles Shackelford. Now, let me say this about the driver, right? Now, the driver, Charles Shackelford, recently had been the driver for Ray Charles, but Ray Charles fired him because of the way he drive. He was always swerving too much, falling asleep behind the wheel and everything. Ray Charles said in his autobiography titled Brother Ray, which is a great book, by the way, he said Charles Shackelford used to like to hang around the shows instead of getting some sleep because he knew he had to drive, and he had to drive a lot of hours, and he liked to drink. That's why Ray Charles fired him. Now back to the story right now. Charles Shackelford, now driving, leaving the show hours later. He's driving. Somehow he loses control and went into the other lane of oncoming traffic and ended up in a head-on collision, crashing into another car. And the car exploded, bursting into flames. Now, some of the other musicians on the tour, everybody was following each other, but some of the other musicians was way far back. They was far behind Jesse's car, and they say they saw a horrible glow, like a red glare that lit up the sky where the 2 cars collided. And Jesse Belvin and the driver Charles were killed instantly. Sad, man. His wife Joanne was in the car too. She was taken to the hospital with injuries, and they had to put her in a coma. But a week later, she died from her injuries. But here's the crazy part about that, right? Now, according to Etta James, and she put this in her book, I think it's called Rage to Survive. Etta James, she heard the story from Jackie Wilson because her and Jackie Wilson was real close. She said the hospital refused to treat Joanne until they got some money. So Joanne, she remained untreated until someone got in touch with Jackie Wilson. And that's when he drove from Dallas, Texas, all the way back to Arkansas with some money to give the doctors, but she died of her injuries a few days later. That's sad, man. The doctors left her untreated with a crushed pelvis, a crushed chest, and a broken arm. Etta James also said that Jackie Wilson told her, though. Now, Jackie Wilson told her that the crash was the driver's, Charles Shackelford, fault because he fell asleep behind the wheel. Because everybody else in the car was asleep, and Jesse had his arm around his wife, Joanne, while sleeping. But right before the crash, during the swerving, he grabbed his wife Joanne's head and shoved it beneath the car radio, which probably saved her life at that moment. But Jesse went through the windshield and was nearly decapitated, though. Sad, man. Now, Jesse's guitarist, Kirk Davis, was in the car too. He was asleep in the back seat. He was injured but survived. He was the only one to make it, but they say he never gave an interview about what really happened that night. He probably don't remember though, because actually he was hurt pretty bad. He was in a coma. And the other car that they hit, which was a husband and wife from Milwaukee, died also from the head-on collision, which is sad. So a total of 5 people lost their life that day. Now, when police arrived on the scene, one of the first state troopers on the accident scene stated that both of the rear tires on Jesse Belvin's black Cadillac had been obviously tampered with. He said it looked like the tires had been slashed. But after making that statement, he gave no more details, which made people think foul play was involved. Because there is no evidence from the crash scene, no notes, no photos, or if a report was ever even filed. And you know how the police was back in that time in the 1950s and the 60s when it came to black people. It just didn't care, you know? So that's why when the word got back that Jesse had died, when that word got back to the black community, they automatically thought foul play because they died in the deep South. Now, they say Jackie Wilson was so upset about his death, he wanted to get his lawyer involved to investigate because he was headed to Dallas, Texas, also right behind Jesse them to perform. But he ended up being late because he had car trouble too right after the show. He thought somebody had messed with his tires too, tried to sabotage his car. And by the time he got to Dallas, Jackie Wilson was wondering why Jesse hadn't arrived yet. So that's when he called Jesse's mother in LA, asking if she had heard from them, but she hadn't. Like I said earlier, man, when they was leaving that Little Rock, Arkansas show, there was a bunch of white men around their cars, and one was underneath the car. He could have planted a bomb, anything under there, because they say Jesse Belvin's car exploded and burst into flames, but a head-on collision could do that too. And to be fair, his driver did like to drink. That's why Ray Charles fired him. And he wouldn't rest up for the long hours of driving, so he could have nodded off or something and fell asleep behind the wheel. And you know, Jesse and his wife Joanne, man, were both buried by each other at the Evergreen Cemetery in Los Angeles, California. And you know what's crazy though? After Jesse Belvin's death, right, Sam Cooke signed to the same record label, RCA Victor Records. Because what people don't know is after Sam Cooke left King Records, he went to LA to get a good record deal like Jesse Belvin and his wife had got. And he learned a lot. He learned a lot of business from them. They were all good friends. Look, in the Sam Cooke documentary called The Two Killings of Sam Cooke on Netflix, which is that's a great documentary. There was a part in there where Sam Cooke was so upset after hearing about Jesse Belvin's death that he boycotted a segregated show in Memphis, Tennessee, refusing to perform, risking his life. I think he boycotted a couple shows after his death, though. And Jesse Belvin and Joanne, they did have two sons. Jesse Belvin Jr., he said he was working on a book about Jesse's life. And he stated for years he's been trying to find out what really happened to his parents. He also said that the song Earth Angel might have been the reason his parents lost their lives. But one thing his mother Joanne did when she became manager of her husband Jesse Belvin is put the kid's name on the publishing so they can live off the royalties. That was very smart of her for doing that. She was a smart woman. But Jesse Belvin Jr., the son, I hope he does do that book, man. He sings too. He sounds pretty good. So y'all make sure y'all check him out when y'all get a chance. And this story, man, this story should definitely be a movie. And I was surprised that there's no documentary or anything, on him, man. It's a lot of missing pieces to this story. So hopefully his son put that book out so we can get a lot more real information. Jesse Belvin, man, 27 years old when he died. His wife, Joanne, was 25 years old. Rest in peace to both of them, man. Rest in peace to everybody that lost their life that day. So I gotta ask y'all, what y'all think? Was it an accident or foul play was involved? So y'all leave a comment and let me know what y'all think, and stay tuned for more episodes, because I like this series, Accidental Demise. I can really get deep. We can really get deep and dig deep into the depths of a lot of these artists. It's a lot of them I want to redo. We need to dig deep into, like Natina Reed, the Charmaine Maxwell, Sean Levert, especially Johnny Kemp. I'm gonna redo that one. We're gonna dig deep.